Welcome to this new book news reading, celebrating writers whose books were published during the pandemic lockdown. My name is Karen Schubert, and I'm the director of Lit Youngstown, a literary arts nonprofit in Northeast Ohio. We have programs for writers, readers, and storytellers, and I'd like to invite you to a book discussion this Wednesday on children's books by Black authors and illustrators. And more information is available at lityoungstown.org. So thank you for joining us. I'm very pleased to feature these three poets today, and congratulations to them on their new publications. We'll follow tonight's readings with a conversation about these books. Kelly Bancroft's prose, poetry, and plays have been produced and published widely. She lives in Youngstown, Ohio, where she teaches at Hiram College and the Martin P. Joyce Juvenile Justice Center. This is her first full-length collection, Two Dreams of the Afterlife, published by BlazeVox Books. Welcome, Kelly.
Thank you. Thank you. Oh, I'm first. Thank you for inviting me, and what a treat to meet Heather and to meet her work and to be reunited with Nancy, who I've known since I was very young. So it's wonderful to see Nancy. I think it's been probably about a year since we've seen each other in the flesh. So it's great to be here. Thank you. My first book, I never thought that my first reading of a first book would be during the apocalypse, but here we are. And with any luck, it will not be the apocalypse. We are on our way to hopefully better times. So the book, Two Dreams of the Afterlife, is divided into three parts. And I thought what I would do is read a couple of pieces from each section just to give you a taste of what the whole book, maybe what the whole book sort of feels like. After I put the manuscript together, and actually after I showed it to a friend of mine, she was like, this seems like three sections of your life, three sort of almost different decades of your life. And she was right on target, and I hadn't thought about that really. So this first section is called Timepieces, and it really is kind of from my 20s, poems that I wrote in my 20s. So I'll read the first poem in the book. It's called Timepiece. The childless woman I've just met says she could set her watch by my biological tick. A girl's goldfish flickers in a bag. A husband scolds his wife, eyeing a clock. You got time to kill? Inmates in neon poke the earth with sticks along the highway. In the bundles they leave behind, I picture babies, denture pink, black cords brittle as November's stems. Some days are like this. Other days, I am my Aunt Edna, the blood of her stitched and restitched heart inching through pig's valves until her death. At the kitchen table once, she said to listen, hear the tiny flowering exhalation, the close and click. There's no Big Ben in me, no grandfather, no rigged dynamite stick, but sometimes I hear it. A cheap timepiece in a kid's game, rickety cardboard spinner or an egg timer, a minute to find the answer, a minute to unscramble some sense, a minute to move your marker, a minute to jump the fence. In the first section, there are a lot of kind of like wrestling with ideas of domesticity and early kind of romance and romantic and sexual attachments, I guess. And also my mother is in here, and she's in later sections as well. And this is a poem about my mom, and she likes Thomas Kinkade, and she has Thomas Kinkade paintings, or at least she used to have one or two Thomas Kinkade paintings in her house. And so this is called My Mother in a Painting. Not the gun, not the pension, not the knot 40 years tight, not the motion detector light. My mother tells me never has she felt safe. One doctor prescribes taking the hand of her girl self into unknown, uncharted land, a failed therapy. Only in a favorite painting can she rest. Gazebos, a cottage, a cowlick of smoke. Morning glories trumpet the clouds, oil rendering heaven. She sits, she waits for him. Brushstroke in a garden, an act of faith. She waits for him, a sweepstakes. Another in this section is based on a photograph. And we lived in, I was in a military family, so we moved around a lot, and we lived in Memphis. And I actually first began to speak when I was in Memphis, so I had a real thick accent for a long time. And sometimes it goes back into that when I'm around my mom, and when my aunt and my grandma and some of my relatives were still living. So this is when we all went to Graceland. We went a few times, and this is based on a photograph from when we went to Graceland. Photograph with Stone Lion, Graceland, 1967. My brother's hair still blonde, my mother still plump from pregnancy. It is the summer of waiting. My father waits to become the boy I dreamed took me to prom. I wait for the day I will lop a $50 from my hill, sliding on a box down the hill. The old man who will carry me home, wringing out my blood, sits folding his handkerchief. It is the summer my aunts will drive 300 miles for one glimpse of the king's pink Cadillac, one elbow, one point of one collar, one stray grace note. Who can guess for what the king waits? Behind us, the doorway's stone lion eyes steady, like white waves cresting, never breaking his carved locks. The second section of the book is, I think I wrote this, late 20s, early 30s, and then I tinkered with it now and then. I had a fellowship, a residency at Ragdale, and I went with this whole other thing in mind, and I had peace and quiet. I sat down and I was like, whoo, and it just came to me. And so I wrote most of this while I was there and then played with it. It was a kind of an unexpected, it was an unexpected surprise. So the second section is called The Bionic Family, and they're prose poems that take experiences of my family and kind of blended in with pop culture figures, magazines, stories, movies, TV shows. So I'll read a couple from there. Little Flea on the Prairie Dog, I'd call the show, because to see the Ingalls family huddled together for as long as their tallow allowed, no phone, no TV, their future spread out before them like a hand-knit shawl, it just hurt too much. Then Laura would go upstairs to curl beneath the quilt her mother sewed from scraps of her childhood, and she would listen to her parents' settled breaths, her handsome father muttering the Bible. The foxes, her family, the brush of the grasses like her father's whiskers, that's what little girls on the prairie dreamed about. So I had to make fun. What harm would it do? Laura, I thought, once you were real, but now you're dead. You're a rerun, a dull book, a joke. My first literary crush was on John Boy. So I have a couple of poems. I know Nancy likes one of these. I really love John Boy, and I think I still do. So this is, I have two of these poems in this Bionic Family section about John Boy. And some of you may be too young to know who John Boy Walton was. Google that. And here we go. So this one's called John Boy's Mole. Mom said if she had his money, she'd sure as hell get that mole cut off. But John Boy without that mole was like Paul Newman without his blue eyes, like tap water without algae. And I knew I could love John Boy not in spite of, but because of his mole, so long as each night ended the way it did on the show, that angel's view from outside the house, lights going off one by one. Good night. Good night. That single harmonica chord like a lullaby or a soft kiss between the eyes. Sometimes his kerosene burning way into the night as he wove his simple stories. John Boy, warden of words, keeper of the family who would never have reached syndication without you. Oh, John Boy, I am one. I am your mountain muse. Good night, typewriter. Good night, mole. We shall meet again in the morning light. Good night, John Boy. Good night. This second John Boy piece is the last of this particular section. Dear John Boy, I am writing to you from my attic room by candlelight on a royal typewriter the color of waxed lips. I am not on Walton Mountain. The only mountain I know is the heap I've left behind. The husband, the shepherd, the black cats, the old house. From my desk, I can see the graveyard of my ancestors where I've walked, climbing the little slope where the infants are buried, pinwheels stabbing the ground. The cross my grandpa carved for his firstborn, skin the color of the sky, leans to the left. The wingless angel of my fallen great uncle is poised mid-flight. Tonight, my fingers pound home row again, my pinky reaching impossibly for the plus sign to make everything add up. I know you understand. Those nights you sit in the skull of the house composing while the world sleeps. I know you're trying to believe that the holes in our lives become a string of pearls, at least in ellipses. Which is why I loved you then, will always love you, my antiquated heartache, my Blue Ridge bow. Good night, John Boy. Good night. You owe yourself to watch a Walton's episode. And the Walton special should be coming up. Oh, I don't know if I can do that. I'll just cry like a baby. Just two more from the third section of the book, which is called Two Dreams of the Afterlife. And the first is actually a poem. It's got 9 parts, which sounds horrible, but they're 9 little bitty parts, so they don't last too long. So this first poem with the 9 parts is called Amso. I am so sensitive, I can intuit the famed gnat fart. I anticipate the silver whisker nascent in my chin. The ticks of clocks and strangers' footfalls alter my heart. I've bothered tumors into blooming, breasts to dwindling. When I hear a twang, it's instantly mine, and soon I forget where I'm from. I am so vain, I check myself in coffee spoons. My only lovers could pass for my twin. I tint my hair to match the trees. I'll wring my own neck before letting it age. I am so sympathetic. If I were a fighter, I'd applique hearts on my shorts and step into the ring to punch my own shadow, the reigning considerate weight. I am so small, I can pass as a stamp or thumbtack. I can poke your heart, just a pinprick. I can shrink the enemy to my own slight bulk and lord over her or him, my superior might or might not. I'm the back of an earring. I am lint in your pocket. I am a beauty mark so minor you wouldn't think to excise it. I am so nice. I once peeled some teen from a highway wreck, then crawled back in when she cried for her necklace. And once I promised a woman my ex had freshly fucked that I'd break to him news of her herpes simplex. She thanked me, cried. No biggie, I lied. I am so atrophied, I've heard. I'd make a prune appear plum, a wool sweater in the dryer, a lamb coat again. I'm Brewer's droop. I'm Ralph Nader's camp. I'm Roosevelt's calves, the future's tea leaves. I'm so holy, my cufflinks bleed, and my face emerges in the Pope's dry toast. My knees need no kneelers. On the 7th day, I rest. I confess, I give myself up for Lent. I am so bipolar. I've met myself at the equator. I'm clockwise and counter. In utero, I absorbed my own twin. Buoy and Titanic, delete and send. When I chase my own tail, I win. I am so stable, I seesaw solitarily, and my shrink has shrunk her own head. I can surf on a stick, and Lady Justice waffles when weighing in on me, so struck by my evident sanity. So this last one, I wrote, I guess in like my mid-40s, so it's about 10 years old. And this is called Crown. If in her blackest embryonic trance, the child saw it all came to nothing. If she foresaw the flesh gates parting to ghettos of loss, loves so cold they refuse shadows. If she even guessed she would choose one spring day to rewind the ill-timed rendezvous inside of her. If she knew that the cell cluster already in her walls would one day knock her to the floor, weeping for the torn myth she'd fully imagined, she would not crown. She would bend back into the cell, back to the chance that sprang her, back, before idea and desire. So we do not tell her. Even in the cave, we lullaby and coo her. Even in the death crib, we pat her hand and swear it will be all right. Shh, it will be. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Kelly, thank you so much.
No, thank you, Karen.
Heather Swan's poetry has appeared in Poet Lore, The Hopper, Phoebe, Cold Mountain Review, Midwestern Gothic, and several anthologies. Her nonfiction has appeared in Aeon, The Learned Pig, Catapult, Minding Nature, Belt Magazine, Isle, and Edge Effects. She teaches writing and environmental literature at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and her new book is A Kinship with Ash, published by Terrapin Books. Welcome, Heather.
Thank you so much, Karen. This is just lovely. Thanks for organizing it. And thank you, Kelly and Nancy. I'm just really delighted to meet you and to be here with you. Kelly, those are amazing poems. And maybe we'll get a chance to talk later about them. But thank you so much.
Thank you.
And I also will say thank you very much to Diane Lockridge, who's my editor, who made this book possible for me. Yeah, working with Terrapin Books has been really wonderful. So this book, A Kinship with Ash, is a book that's really, it reflects very much my deep relationship with the natural world. I'm a person who teaches environmental literature and writing, like Karen said, and this book is absolutely born out of my concern about what the planet is facing right now, in terms of climate change and extinction, but it's also very interested in rekindling our sense of wonder and honoring the beauties that are around us all the time that we often take for granted. And so I hope that the poems are an invitation to connect with this natural world. So the first poem in the book is called Directive, and as a child, I was my father had the poem Directive by Robert Frost to memory, and I believe in some ways that hearing that recited frequently really informed my sense of poetry, my sense of sound, and even though I didn't understand that poem at all when I was a little girl, I was hearing it, and I'd like to just dedicate this poem to my dad who just died. And so this first poem is called Directive. In this world of waters, the unleashed waters, we wend our way not heeding the beacons while the snow geese wait for ice that never arrives. And the swans move southward but tarry. Who designed our faulty compass? We must stop now and scrape the soil clear of plastic shards and dead grass, and with our fingernails etch a new map, born of bone, aware of our kinship with ash, with crickets, with wrens. Several poems in the book are called pesticide poems, and the pesticide poems are written in. What happened was I learned that pesticides, brand names of pesticides, were using words like serenade and victor and calypso and all of these words that I thought, wow, those are really beautiful words, and they've been co-opted and used as names for poisons. And so I wanted to reclaim those words. And this first poem is an example of that. It's called Pesticide 1, Liberty, and it's for Deb Sullivan. Remember how we ran through the fields of Queen Anne's lace, shirtless, our sex still knotted like tiny fists in our chests, jeans rolled up to the knees, and how our ankles were crusted with mud from the creek where we caught frogs and crawdads for sport and let them go. Remember eating ground cherries and wild raspberries, sucking the sweet from red clover, and the clouds of yellow sulfur wings rising around us on days after rain when they gathered on the drying puddles in the road. And the neighbor's farm, where we raced through the halls of corn, risking being sliced by the menacing green knives, stealing when we were hungry, tearing open an ear and plunging our teeth into the firm, inviting flesh, the dirt mixed with sweat. Remember when we thought what we should fear was the bull we outran, and the nettles and the ticks? Before our bodies betrayed us, before we knew we were doomed all along, before we learned of the real poisons lurking all around us, before I started having nightmares and you started carrying a gun. Part of the reason that I am so sort of concerned about things going on with the natural world is, well, I certainly spent tons of time in fields when I was a kid, but also because I became a beekeeper as an adult, and being a beekeeper right now, I started doing it, apprenticing some other beekeepers when the big decline, pollinator decline, really started to hit, and so it was a difficult time for me, and I wanted to, figure out who was the bad guy, but in fact there were so many things that we needed to change, and so much of my first book was about trying to find strategies for saving the bees, but this is really about the experience of finding bees that had been poisoned by pesticides. So this is called Pesticide 7, Victor. The handfuls of dead bees she finds after the spraying are not the worst part for the beekeeper. It's the bees still struggling that gets to her, limping in a circle like someone who's been spinning on a tire swing for too long, who then stands dizzy, nauseous, stunned. Their wings shudder, but they cannot fly. These insects, whose bodies know the rhythm of the blossoms, the changing angles of the sun, whose alchemy gives us liquid gold, whose love affairs with pistils and stamens give us apricots, almonds, melons. To witness is to be dredged, she thinks. What war do we think we're winning? I think I'm gonna, I'll just read 2 more poems. One of them is called To Softness, and actually, no, maybe I'll read this one. Yeah, I think I'll read this one instead. This one's called On Breaking. And this is, I love that poem, Kelly, the final poem that I could relate to that so much, the crown. Because it's so difficult, life in general, being in the world is fraught, but it's also so filled with beauty. So this poem is really, I wrote it for my son, and when I had first become a mother, and so it's called On Breaking. Those early days when you were small enough to carry, my entire life curved like a nautilus around you, You were separate, but not severed. Never have I been so raw, child, as I felt bringing you into this world of both violets and beheadings. How can we remain open? What choice do we have but to don our armor in order to go forth each day? But to be most alive, we must be willing to be broken over and over, to keep our palms open, those muscles in our chests unbarbed in whatever body we're given. So may you open like the orchid, my child, I beseech you. The wind blows, the leaves fall. There is no compass but love. And then I'm going to read one last poem, and then maybe we can talk later more about all of it. I'm going to read this poem because right now I just feel like we're all so tired of, the pandemic has been so hard, and there's been so much difficulty. Our country has experienced so much violence and sadness, and so I just feel like all of us need a little more kindness, to just be gentle with each other. It's a hard time, and I hope we can heal from it. So this last poem is called How to Love the Damaged Ones. See how the body of the horse flinches when she startles, how her flesh flickers, haunch rippling like soil in a quake, hooves pawing the ground as if trying to move backward in time, eyes wide, neck arching back to see more of what might bite or bruise her. Not because you mean to harm her, but memory drives her reflexes, and adrenaline spikes clutch the brain. Don't give up. Lean in. Only when your hand and your voice become as common as breath and as kind will her heartbeat slow, her face soften, and you will be surprised by how far she can run and what she'll be willing to carry. Thanks so much for letting me read.
Thank you so much, Heather. Nancy Krakowski's first book, Velocity, won the Agnes Lynch Starrett Prize from the University of Pittsburgh Press. Her new book, The Woman in the Corner, published by University of Pittsburgh Press, was named one of the top 100 books of poetry for 2020 by Library Journal. Welcome, Nancy.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here, partly because I'm from Youngstown, and Youngstown has a special place in my heart. And I'm so excited to be here with Kelly, my old friend. And I'm so excited to have been introduced to Heather's work. So thank you all. Heather, I wanted to tell you that last poem you read. So I haven't written in months, pandemic stuff going on. But that poem that you read, the last one you read, got me writing. So thank you for that. Yes. Okay, so I'm going to start off with two sort of Ohio, Youngstown-centric poems. The first one is called Where Are You From? A row of houses made from communion wafers. When it sogged, reverence turned soggy. It was kind of funny. Stiff-haired ladies thinking about saliva in their mouths, making more saliva, even though no one wanted to. Sometimes the air smelled like mints scattered in the bottom of a purse, sometimes like onions. Once, a neighbor bent down to touch my cheek, and her mouth was a cedar chest, darkly sweet. We all had secrets, and I wanted to find them. When the wind blew through trees, some of us heard prayers. One mentioned art, our Father who art in heaven, and I got excited. Once, a man showed me a Jasper Johns painting. Why paint a flag, I said. Then, oh. In small towns in Ohio, oh is a native tongue, a birthright to not know, then to know. In the same prayer, I heard the word hollow, and though my stiff-haired aunt corrected me, hallowed, she said, what we revere. Its echoes never went away. So I have a bunch of poems in here that are question poems, and that was one of them. Okay, so back in the 80s, Youngstown had the best Salvation Army, right, Kelly? Remember the Salvation Army? Yeah, I don't think it's there anymore. But when we were in college, that's where we shopped. And so this poem is about that, kind of. So it's called, and I want to say it's inspired by Diane Seuss. If you haven't read Diane Seuss, you need to read Diane Seuss. So this is called The Salvation Army Wasn't Meant for You. The fedora smelled of the damp basement shop, of men who bunked upstairs, listened to talks of temperance, then pushed fumigated couches into penitent rows. My poor mother, poor woman who'd been saved by the suburbs, then exiled to powder room envy, practically burped embarrassment. Where did you get that? Gray of house dust, gray of calloused skin. I'd slipped on some small gray man's head, stuck the hat with a pigeon feather. We were trying to rise above a poor immigrant past, and there I was, feathered obstacle to blending in. I'd plucked the hat from babushkas, what my mother put on, the meek shall inherit the earth, and neckties, what my father shed to pick apples from an ex-orchard's stunted trees. He'd call off half a day, roll up his sleeves, churn away skins, while my mother boiled jars to almost breaking. We'd mash the fruit into sauce, line winter shelves, then eat to bargain the cabbage from our breaths. The apples opened their voluptuous smell while I wished for manwich, Hungry Jack, that free American feel in my mouth. What had seemed like salvation was my land of not enough. I tamped this inheritance under that brim, spilled abundant hair, framed my apple cheeks like a parade queen. That too big hat forced my chin up. Who needs dreams when you have attitude? Did I want attention? Yes. Hey, Annie Hall. Hey, Boy George. I belted voluminous pinstripe trousers around a defiant waist, wore silk slips as dresses, tricycle red pedal pushers, and always the hat. Who do you think you are? A long-haired man in a dress? Yes, vintage 1960, fabric girly scripted with names of herbs, tarragon, savory, sage. I would taste them all. I hope there's somebody listening who remembers my fedora. Kelly, do you remember it? Yes, horrified my poor mother. All right, and if anybody has a picture of me in that hat, I want it. Okay, so I'm gonna read the title poem from my new book, The Woman in the Corner. Warning, it is a little long. Sit back, take a sip of something. Here we go. The Woman in the Corner. I cut a leaf from my mother's blooming violet, long alive past her death, to start a plant for my daughter, who I never knew as a baby, born to a different woman, but for whom I explained birth control, blood, how to relax, push in a tampon, what my mother never touched. Her body, a child-making mystery that pushed me into mystery. What is a woman who doesn't long for kids? The leaf I choose, long-stemmed, healthy. I taught my daughter how to skip. We were on a bridge. She wasn't my daughter then. For months after, she reached for my hand. Let's do it again. Never wanted to walk. I dip the clean cut in take root, what I wanted for us. Indole 3-butyric acid. If spilled on skin, rinse for 20 minutes. If inhaled, call 911. I place the broken solitude in dirt. Chemicals cut my daughter's birth mother's blood. Legal drugs, illegal, hormones, history, a diagnosis, bipolar. A woman who nods off as she drives a side-swiped Honda to NA meetings, stands slack-faced and smoking outside, whose bad credit phone calls flood my house. In the corner of my dining room, on the corner of a shelf, a leaf waits in the come and go of light, pokes up like a paddle piercing a drowning lake. I am trying to save it. The violet's dirt can't be drenched, so each morning I spritz. Enough? Too much? My mother taught me to parcel out love. Something about giving meant taking away, as if tenderness was an apple and love a mouse's sharp teeth. It was hard touching my daughter's toothbrush bristles to check if she'd brushed, counting dirty underwear in the week's laundry to see if she'd changed. The smell of dried kid shit, bad breath, were mothering failures I could fix while I battled the failures of a thrifty, handed down heart. At 16, my daughter brushes eyeshadow bruises to her neck, her wrists, pretends she's been beaten, threatens suicide, believes woman as victim is a path to love, runs into my bedroom at 3 a.m. I didn't mean it, as cops pound the door. It was hard. Reading about fetal alcohol syndrome, studying the shape of her young girl ears, reading signs of bipolar disorder in kids, tracking her hours of sleep, picking her up early from a monthly visit with her mom, ambulance in front of the house, shining red and white silence on my daughter's hollowed face. Years later, hugs, wails, the knowing her mother would never change. My daughter leaves for college. I am the mother of caution. Don't watch, think, don't ask, plan, don't remember. My failure, I know she'll fuck up. Dark guesses of how. Alone in her dorm room, we're never alone in a room. Our woman pasts stuck to our skin, greasy lotion, blood itch. A month of spraying. The leaf begins to die, which could mean roots, could mean rot. My daughter and I talk on the phone. Her voice, the voice she uses with friends, part Doc Marten boots, part breezy new perfume. I've got to go, I've got to go. She forgets I too live a life, have things to do. Stare down her empty bed, touch a picture she'd left behind, my gift meant to remind her of home. Us, high above a river, hair swimming to the sky. I'm gonna read a poem, another sort of family poem. Since it was just Thanksgiving, And since we probably couldn't be with family, I'm going to read this. It's called A Thanksgiving and Unsaid Grace. My father-in-law calls to say he brined the turkey to tastelessness, and no one hears. Husband and daughter, brothers and their families downstairs playing games, so my dead mother answers. I know nothing about turkey's flesh, but have known them to chase me wild as I bolted through a city forest on my bike. My mother's cooked one each year since before she married, willing her onion and cabbage house to smell American, and cooked one each year since she died, rubbing the bird's skin with butter after its saltwater bath before hours of roasting, browned air bolting her to a world she didn't love. Stuffed from 6 kids, her big bag body's skin stayed the same size as she shrunk old. Skin under chin where more chins had been, stomach skin atop stomach skin under empty feed sack breasts. The flesh and fat she wanted to shed dusts her coffined bones. She takes the call. It's okay, she blamed each of us for her nipples meeting navel. It's okay, she locked herself in a room while we downed beers and laughed. It's okay, life is hard, even when its daily makings aren't, and thanks are wishbones we forget to snap. She'd riddled my morning while I wanted to sleep, plucking stuck feathers, yanking organs, stuffing her emptiness with torn white bread, boiling giblets for my father, also dead, who, after everyone leaves, will study the innards, say their names, heart, liver, gizzard, then rip with delicate fingers. I, too, am disappearing into gray age, listening to the basement laughs. My dead mother debates table versus sea salt, though she's never met my husband or his father, never stood at my kitchen counter, never marveled at the windows that eye a river and remind me to travel out of my head, never said until now, it's too much work to keep them clean. She peed with the door closed, kept her nightgown under a pillow, watched Phil Donahue, and loved the polka, which I'd pull her into on Sunday afternoons to twirl her out of her sadness, which twirled me into mine. She loved vanilla ice cream, morning glories, and the ocean, where I send her now. Breast stroking past breaking waves, rubber-capped head drifting parallel to shore, leaving her kids, finally, not at peace, but to figure out what they can love and how. And I'm going to read one more poem. So this is Tiny Day. You need to know about Tiny Day. Tiny Day is a tiny newspaper edited by another Youngstowner, one of my dearest friends, Danielle Leone. If you don't know it, you should subscribe. There's no internet presence. Send me a message. I'll tell you how to figure it out. But I am going to, it's like getting a little piece of heaven once a week in your mailbox. So I'm going to read a poem, a new poem that was published in the literary supplement. This is my last poem. Thank you so much for listening, and yeah, excited to chat with y'all. So this is called I Wanted to Buy Ice Cream on eBay. And I wanted it just to be starting to melt when it arrived on my doorstep. And I wanted it to be vanilla with hot fudge and small salty pretzels. And I wanted it to come with a minuscule silver spoon because though I like ice cream, I like it in small bits, and I like to pretend I'm a Victorian. I wanted to buy a corset on eBay, and I wanted it to be black and lacy, but still strong enough to squeeze my ice-creamed waist tiny and burst my breasts up and block my breathing, because then I'd have an explanation for all this gasping. I wanted to buy a jerry-rigged ventilator on eBay, one that didn't work but looked like it might. Old bellows and melted hair dryer tubes, a lawnmower engine, and a note from a guy named Big Time Bob. Just needs a little more work. I wanted to buy a new job on eBay, one where my colleagues were all women over 80. We'd take vitamin breaks at 10, naps at noon and 3, and in between, we'd brush each other's hair and sing in rounds. With all those years behind them, they'd know recipes for Jell-O cake and how to be grateful for the creaks in their knees and ex-husbands. They'd know the only work was to talk about our most delicious joys as if they just happened yesterday, which, of course, would make those joys happen again, over and over, endlessly, today and today. Thank you.
Oh my gosh, what a delightful reading. Thank you all so much. I wish we had hours and hours, a big bottle of whiskey or something. So Kelly, would you like to kick off the conversation?
Oh, whew, the pressure. I'm actually going to go in a kind of, I'm going to ask something sort of sideways, and that is, and I think it can apply, I ask it both of Heather and of Nancy, and that is, I'm interested in how the covers of your book inform your book, and at what point those were chosen, and if at some point when you looked at them, it resonated in ways that you were surprised about. So that's my question for both of you.
Nancy, do you want to go first?
Sure, I'll go first. So I want to say that my cover is actually a sculpture from another Ohio person. So his name is Brent Key Young, and I think he taught at Cleveland State, and it's in the Carnegie Museum in Pittsburgh. And I'll have to say that I looked at this sculpture for many years before I had a book and said, that's going to be my cover. And so I kind of knew I wanted that. But after I had a book, I was like, how does this work? And then what you know, when I asked for permission from the sculptor, he said, so how does this tie in with your work? And I was like, oh, need to articulate that now. So anyways, it really made me think. I mean, this is after when the book was, in process. And there's something for me about the delicateness of the sculpture and the beauty of the sculpture and the transparency that really resonated for me. I think that, my book is about love. Love is always delicate, different kinds of love. And something about the transparency for me equaled a kind of truth, which is something I'm always trying to get at in my writing. So that's a fabulous question.
It occurs to me too that that a chair kind of reminds me of, like, take a chair. Kind of you're witnessing and you're kind of off in a corner, but there's something about kind of sitting and watching and spending time with that makes me think of that chair as well. It's a great answer.
Beautiful. Thank you for the question. So this cover, for anyone that hasn't seen it, it's by a woman named Emily Arthur, who is an artist who currently lives in Madison. I discovered her work because the two of us were on a panel together. She and I was talking about the art that's in my first book, which is a book called Where Honeybees Thrive. And after every chapter, I had a gallery of an artist that was doing work that I thought was important, and for a variety of reasons. And so we were on this panel to talk about art and environmental issues. And her work is about not just environment, but also very much informed by her heritage. And she's a Native American woman. And this piece is called Red Sky Star Map of Home. And this particular series was about how the places where she lived, where her ancestors lived, were actually sort of scraped clear of the people that, you know, her family, her ancestors. But when that happened, non-human beings were also erased. And so there is a way in which the work that she's doing is honoring these invisible landscapes and the things that used to live there. And the work is absolutely beautiful and filled with rich imagery, but it also is very haunting because it has these layers of stories that we don't tell, stories that are really beautiful, but stories that are really hard. Both things exist. And I felt like when I saw her work, I thought, gosh, that's exactly what I think I'm worried about so many of the same issues, and wanting to honor these voices that have been erased. It felt like such a wonderful meeting, and so the two of us will continue to do some projects together in the future. But I was just so excited to get this image for my cover, also just because I love it so much. I think it's so beautiful, and I just felt like, oh my gosh, my poems get to be with this work. So I was just delighted. So I just feel completely filled with gratitude that you even asked the question, so I can share Emily Arthur's work with more people. So thanks for asking that.
It's such a beautiful cover, and when you talk about it, it completely speaks to your work from what I've seen. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, tell us about yours.
Yes, I was going to say, you have to tell us about yours.
Mine is so I do some art, and what I tend to do is take Xerox copies of photographs, and then I paint on top of them and alter them. And that is actually this is actually a detail. That's me. That's a detail from a larger piece that features my grandma and my mom and my aunts out in the backyard with some clothes on the line. And I had planned to actually ask a friend of mine to use her artwork, permission to use her artwork. And then I was like, gosh, I don't know, maybe this one works. And that detail, I think it works. And in fact, when I first saw it, it really moved me, because it really, you think of sometimes it's bewildering to remember that you're this, but you're also this, and how did that happen? And when I look at this, and then when I look at the pictures of my mom and my grandma, my aunts, it feels strange. And anyway, I'm pleased that it worked, and I'm really happy about that. Yeah. Thank you for asking.
Yeah.
Heather, do you have a question?
I do have a question. So one of the things that I actually think about a lot is why poetry? We have all these different genres of writing, and we also have all these new ways of communicating. We have new forms of communication like tweets, and we have advertisements, and we have so many ways of communicating. I'm just so curious what drove Kelly and Nancy, both of you too. I'm sorry, my dog is moving around, so I hope that that's not distracting. But I'm curious why you chose to write poems. And also, I guess, a secondary part of this question is, what do you think poetry is doing for us right now? Like, why is it important to this current historical moment? So I'm actually going to put myself on mute because my dog might just bark and I don't want to just disturb everyone.
Nancy, why don't you start that one?
It's going to be a hard one for me to start because Heather, you stole my question. One of my questions, I have other ones, but because I only, I write emails, I write monthly reports, and I write poems. Like, so I'm the only one here who doesn't do something else. So I'll be really curious to hear, actually both of you talk about that. But I feel like, the thing about poems is they provide a pausing point. And like, my God, do we need that now? I mean, I think about the other forms of communication. I think about how I am somebody who said I was never going to be staring at my phone all the time. I stare at my phone all the time and I get little blips and stuff. But poems pause. They give the writer time to pause and develop and figure things out. And I think they do the same thing for readers, and they let us structure our attention in a very important way, the time that gives us time to think and reflect and connect to each other. So that's what I hope poems are doing now. I hope that's what they always do. And like, we need that kind of attention. I think we need that connection to understanding each other. So, but I want to know how you guys know. It's like, is it going to be a poem? Is it going to be an essay? Is it going to be a short story?
Yeah.
Or a play, Kelly.
Or a play. Yeah.
Right. I think for a lot of years, and those of you, Nancy and maybe a couple of people who are listening know that I've struggled for years just figuring out kind of like, what's my genre? As if you only have to have one. But I have this thought that I need to be one because I want a book. Well, I can't have a book of play. Ego is involved, all sorts of things are involved. And so I started off, with fiction, and then I went to poetry, and then I entered my MFA program as a poet. And then I was like, nah, I don't want to do this. I want to do creative nonfiction. So I did that. And then I left that, and then I went to plays. And I think what I finally come to in my life is understanding that I can have all of these things going on, and that they all affect me differently, and they all let me communicate in different ways. And I'm not going to sound nearly as articulate as you just did, Nancy, because it is a little more muddled for me. But like right now, I'm working on a fiction project as well as some poems, and those are different selves involved. Those are different ways of using language. They're different ways of using of thinking about audience, and honestly, in a really personal way, they're just different emotions that I'm bringing into it. I dream every night. I dream vividly. I remember my dreams. And so there's something about fiction that really speaks to narrative, and something about plays that really speaks to this narrative desire that I have. But poems allow me this freedom to just like, it's a bunny, it's a hat, it's garland. It allows me this associative stuff that other things don't necessarily allow me to be like, I don't know, off the wall in ways that these more linear and these more conventional, conventional for lack of a better word, they allow me to do things that I can't do otherwise. So I don't know the answer to the question exactly, except that for me, they're all different ways of being in the world and different ways of structure in the world. And the beauty for me about poetry, and actually this is something that I teach the students that I work with at the detention center, is there aren't any rules. That's the beauty of it. And these are guys that are there because they don't like rules. They don't do rules well. And I get that. And it really speaks to them. They're like, and I'm like, why do you guys like poetry? Because there aren't any rules. I'm like, exactly, there aren't any rules. And so it speaks to me in that way. And honestly, there don't have to be rules in plays or essays or anything else, but so there's my long rambling answer. It's a good question.
Thank you so much. I really love both of your answers so much. I love the idea of the pause and that relationship that you have, Nancy, with being in the poem, and really that sort of, I think you said, the presence that's required. And I also love this idea of the ability to do all these juxtapositions that feel really wild, that you're talking about in poetry, Kelly. I mean, I think that's marvelous. I remember working with some people who are incarcerated, and I felt like one of the things was that they were like naturals at writing poetry, in part because everything was filled with kind of urgency, and they didn't really have time for any kind of, there wasn't really a lot of extra. It was really just so distilled, and I think that, like, yeah, I learned so much from that experience. So I think it's great that you're doing that work too. How wonderful for those people too. Yeah, thank you.
How about you, Nancy?
Well, we already talked about my question for both of you, but I have, I'm trying to think if there's a way I can make this for both of you, but I don't think it's going to work. But I'm kind of curious about talking a little bit about process. And Kelly, I love your poem Amso. And I love it. And this happens in other places in your book too, but I love the humor. And, like, us poets, speaking for myself, can take ourselves too seriously. And I love how that, especially in that poem, how, it's so self-aware. It's funny, but it's super poignant and honest. And I'm just kind of curious, like, I know you're a funny person, but I'm kind of curious about how humor gets into your poems. Does it, I mean, I'll say it, I'm a writer. I start writing, I don't know where the heck I'm going, and I'm just kind of curious, like, how that works for you. Maybe even just in that poem, thinking about that poem.
Yeah, I don't really know where I'm going either. This poem, I was at AWP, which is just an insane kind of experience. I saw Maggie Anderson. She was reading a tribute to Irene McKinney, and I left it and I'm like, I'm writing this. And I wrote all of that in my hotel room. I skipped a whole bunch of sessions and I just wrote it all. And then I later tinkered with it. I was inspired by her kind of ballsy sort of thing. But I also had realized that, you know what, in my life and in my writing, I play nice way too often. And I really kind of wanted, and I do take myself way too seriously. And I wanted to not take myself so seriously, but also I wanted to make myself laugh. I really love funny poems. I love funny movies. I love funny everything. I love really stupid jokes. And I can spend a lot of time in sadness. I spend a lot of time in sadness. It's a very easy step for me to make. I think it is for a lot of people who are writers. It's a very easy step for me to make. And I just get tired of it. Yeah. I get tired of it. I'm like, damn, I need some light here. And I don't think I can get rid of the darkness, but I can kind of temper it with some like absurdity, or I can temper it with like a crush on John Boy or a crush on a priest or something. And it honestly, for me, just, again, it's really personal. It just makes me feel better. And with the Amso, I'm just like, what are all the things that people have said about me, or what all the things I know I'm too nice. I'm not bipolar, but I know people have thought that about myself. I know these things about myself. So I'm just going to pretend that I'm all of these things and see where that goes. And the rhyme kind of presented itself accidentally, and the form kind of presented itself accidentally. It was really kind of this little cloud burst of, it was a gift. It was a gift from the clouds. And
Gifts.
and I really enjoy, I've never read it out loud. So that was a blast for me to read that out loud. And yeah. So I don't know if that answered your question, but
yeah. And it's
yeah,
so
joy, you know, some
I mean,
joy.
it made me laugh, but it's totally, the details are totally poignant, and it made me really think. So, but
Thank you for that question.
Yeah, similarly, Heather, can I ask you about so your environmental poems? Like, so the directive poem, it's like where you just like, you're basically telling us, right? But then you didn't read this poem. I think it's on lightness, where it's like this unfolding of these gorgeous details. And then you get to this like ending where it's just like, we're messing up the world. But like, do you like, process wise, like, are you like, do you know that's coming, or?
No, it's so funny. I was thinking about, I was actually thinking about this humor thing, which, I mean, I think that the way that my family manages darkness is by laughing. Both of my children are hilarious. My mom is very funny. But I think that the stuff that I think about and the things that I tend to write about are things that are concerning me deeply. And one of the things, I guess, when I go into a poem, I don't know what's going to happen. What happens is that I start with an image and then I just keep interrogating it. And sometimes, like I'll go for a walk and then I'll think, oh, that belongs in that poem too. And so these images kind of come together, not because it's really planned, but because I almost feel like I'm on a scavenger hunt and I'm like, oh yeah, there it is. That goes there too. But I don't have a list like at the beginning. This isn't making any sense. The thing I would say is that the poems that are most interesting to me are the ones where I am surprised, and I feel like I remember hearing Stephen Dunn talk a long time ago about form. And he said a neat thing, which is that he said he thinks that some people go into writing a poem like an ice skater that knows how to do all the beautiful figure eights, and that's the way that poet knows how to execute a beautiful thing on the ice, is by the practice and going through the same. And he said, but there's another kind of writing, and it's like someone who's an ice traveler, and it's these people that go out into the poem like they're going onto thinning ice, and they're never sure, like, am I going to sink right now? And I have to kind of find the next place where I can put my foot, and I when I heard that, I was like, oh yeah, that's exactly what it is for me. I'm in there and I don't know where I'm going next. And that's part of the reason why it's so exciting for me, because I learned something at the end. And yeah, I wish that I was more funny in my poetry, but I generally, I get really surprised by it, but I don't find like that I naturally write funny things. And I wish that I did, because when I hear like a poem about John Boy, I'm like, yes, that's awesome, But yeah, I tend to write to sort of solve things, I think, for myself. The other thing, though, I will admit, is that being a person that's so concerned about the planet, I feel sometimes like I want to create an opportunity for people to connect to these things that we sometimes take for granted or don't notice. And so like the desire to somehow like open someone to wonder that I'm experiencing. And probably the only way that can ever happen is if I'm authentic in my own pursuit of that wonder, right? Like once I start summarizing it or labeling it like, oh, here's some wonder for you, then it probably would fall flat. But I think that if I'm actually there, maybe someone else can experience that. Of course, I don't know what the experience is for someone else, but that's my dream, right? I hope that
I would say that the poem that I mean, actually several of the poems you read tonight, but the poem that I referenced before, I mean, that was definitely my feeling. It's like, I felt like I was so in those images and you're making me see things so much. And then when it ended up being a poem that was really about like let's think about the environment, I was surprised, but I was like, yes, yeah. So
I can't tell you how meaningful that is to hear that, honestly, Nancy, because yeah, I mean, especially coming from you, thank you for that. Thank you.
Well, that's a really wonderful place to end, but I wish we could keep going. So thank you all so much for coming to listen to tonight's reading. Thank you to our readers, and I wish you all well.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Karen.
Karen, thank you.